So let's move on into the second part of the morning. And our next speaker is Barry Liebert. Barry Liebert has spent the last 10 years investing in and founding social media and open innovation companies. And his latest venture, Open Matters, helps senior leaders understand, cope with, and fully leverage the power of social media. He co-founded a company called Mzinga, which is a leading provider of social software, services, and analytics. He's also an investor and director at Innocentive, the leader in open innovation for companies and governments. He's on a number of boards and really focuses on the impact of open and social networks on our society. He's an author. You all have his book that you were given when you registered. And he's just a really, really fun, energetic, smart guy who just has a ton to share. And he's here to talk to us about the sort of basis for the book, which was Social Nation, How to Harness the Power of Social Media. And the whole thing is that, as we all know, consumers and customers don't want to be on the sidelines anymore. They want to be part of the conversation. They want to be part of the brand. And how do you manage that? How do you succeed in that? And Barry's certainly one of the guys that has most of the answers. So Barry has asked me to ask you to engage with him, and you know, throughout this presentation, make it a conversation. We'll have some microphones going around for when you have some comments and some thoughts, so we don't need to save it all for the end. So with that, let's welcome Barry Liebert.
Thank you. Okay, can you all hear me? Great, perfect. Let's see if we can start the day a little bit uniquely. We've heard from two speakers talk about the fact that your brand matters. Now, I'm not so sure I agree with any of that, because I'm not so sure it's about your brand anymore. In fact, quite the opposite. I think it's about us. It's about the individual. It's about our stories. It's about our lives. It's about our experiences. And I'm no longer a believer, having been in the social media world since 1993 when I started with AT&T's board, that it's any more about them, the institution, the organization. So here's what I think. We're apparently having some problems. I'm like the pilot of today's journey. I just want you to chill if I'm the CEO until I figure out what's up. And I don't really know what's up anymore as the CEO and the board, since I do board work and CEO. I don't really get this new journey. I don't get what's happening. I don't get why my brand's under attack. I don't get why my customers have all this power. I just don't understand what's happening with my employees and their voices. I'm sort of like a white guy, right there, that guy, 57, you see him up there, who one day turned old, gray, and decrepit. Right there, you see me? I'm those CEOs who just don't get it. And I'm your customer because you're trying to explain to me the world's changed. So the key questions I want to ask of you, and I need your help today, is what's your story? Because I don't think it's about the brand story anymore. I think it's about us. I think it's about each of us individually telling our story and making the brands about us. Making our stories the stories of our organization. So I'm going to ask you, what's your story? So right now, I want you to start tweeting. I want you to use either the brand management Twitter account handle or #SocialPower. And I want you to tell your story. I want you to get used to telling your story. And I want it to be a profoundly human and authentic story. I don't want you to believe anymore it's about IKEA stories or JetBlue stories or AT&T story. It's about your story. It's about your authentic voice. It's about being heard, being seen, and for others to hear your voice so they know that you're human. Because otherwise, as far as I'm concerned, I'm tired of the organization preaching to me, of them telling me about their brand and forgetting that I'm a human in this dialogue. The second is I want you to think about your story in a way that you would engage somebody. That somebody is a friend, a person, employee, a partner, an investor. And I want you to think, well, what channels you're going to use. Because remember that old guy up there on the screen, that one right there with the white hair? Maybe he or she doesn't get the idea of social media. So think about what channels are you going to use to tell your story. And then what culture are you going to be able to convey through your story? And then ultimately, how are you, your organization, going to compensate you? And here we're going to talk about this today. You for telling your story. Now, I know that's going to be hard for your organizations to believe, but to tell your story, 350 stories out here, to make it personal, I have to change the compensation of my boards to recognize, to encourage my people to tell their stories. I have to change the compensation systems to encourage them to tell their story. So here's my thought. The world's changed. It's on a huge collision course. We see it every day. It didn't happen overnight. The first two speakers spoke about it as if it was the third planet from the stars. You know that old show, Third Rock from, the moon. And I think ultimately over the last 50 years, the institution collided with the individual. The Apples of the world empowered us with individual technologies, with individual capabilities, with individual voices, and the institution still said, here's your computer, here's your BlackBerry, here's your Outlook. And we started using things like Gmail. Remember, tell your story and see if your story is the same as mine. So how many of you are parents? Fantastic. And if you could bring up the lights a little bit, how many of you grew up in my household where there was a collision of massive proportions? My father went to West Point. My mother went to finishing school for women. And in my household, it was very simple. This is how you ate a square meal. My mother taught me, as my father did, what to say and when to say it. And there was a simple expression in my household, which I bet was the same as in your household, like we heard the first two speakers. It's my way or the highway. Children should be seen and not heard in the household. Who grew up in my household? Thank you very much. It's the same as the organization. Those leaders run our organizations. They're still trying to tell you it's about their story. And I'm trying to tell you, now go back to hands up who has children. How many of your children would accept the fact it's my way or the highway today? What happened to the hands? It's my story at dinner time, not your story at dinner time. How many of them would accept the fact that here is the piece of technology you will use in the household? I'm going to give you an IBM Lenovo. It's going to be one of these big things. You're not going to use one of those iPhones or iThings, whatever those things are called. Forget those iThingies, those things called like iPhones, iPads, iTunes, iThings, anything I. You're going to listen to my music, Frank Sinatra. Any of you have children that buy that? No. Something happened along the way. That guy up on the screen became passé. And our children reshaped our worlds around us. My children went away to college and they said to me, Dad, I'm going to call you every morning, Sunday morning at 9 a.m., just the way you still call your parents at 9 a.m. on Sundays. Now, what do you think I said to my kids? Guys, if you wake up Sunday morning having partied till 9 o'clock in the morning, and if you're still lucid at that time, I would appreciate a call. But I said to them more realistically, how do you communicate with your friends? I was thinking in terms of them. And how do they communicate? Text. How many of your organizations do their communications with their customers using text? Wow, amazing, isn't it? If you really want them to be your friends and you want them to follow you the way I want my kids to follow me, and if I want to friend my customers, my employees on behalf of my boards, then I have to acknowledge the fact that it's about them and their story. I'm telling you everything you'll hear today. If it's not about you and your story, it's no longer true. It's not about a corporate brand. Truth of the matter is, it never was. It's about the individual and our individual stories and how we affiliate with each other. So there's a collision right now taking place. There was a piece of statistic this morning that is frightening. There's a collision right now. The Forbes 400 in the United States have more wealth than half of the remaining population in the United States. 400 people have more wealth than 165 million people. The Republicans can't talk to the Democrats. The East can't talk to the West. China and India is bailing out America. The world is on a systemic collision course because we have lost our way. We don't realize that it is all about us as individuals and our profound stories of life. And our brands have lost their way. They become undifferentiated because they forgot they were just individuals pursuing a life that should have purpose and meaning, in which we are important. So keep thinking about your story. Pound social power, because we're going to do something interesting today to show you how we do this. So if it's about us, and it's no longer about the institution, watch around us how the world systemically is at odds. Watch Europe crumble. Watch America with $14 trillion get into trouble and not take care of its elderly. Watch the Far East try to bail out Italy. China bail out Italy. Something is completely changed. So the customer is king, and kings don't bargain. And kings, which are customers, want it to be about their story. And remember, businesses are about serving individuals. So as you practice today your social power story, remember, your story is the story that matters. But if that's not enough for you as an employee, I love this cartoon. I've heard you're now part of the Enterprise 2.0. How is it going, someone says to one guy, one woman. And the person says at the water cooler, I don't have to go to the water cooler to talk shit anymore about the CEO. I can do it online. My boards don't believe that employees have voices, and they're telling their stories every single day. I have a friend who's on the International Paper Board, and she was telling me recently, well, Barry, this doesn't apply to IP, international paper, because no one cares about IP. And I asked this woman on the board, I said, listen, let me ask you a question if it's not about personal storytelling. Do you cut down trees? She said, well, that's not how we see our business. I said, do you cut down trees? She says, yes. I said, then go to Glassdoor.com and see whether or not your own employees are telling stories about your company's culture. And of course, she was there and she was flabbergasted to see employees are telling their story. They're telling their story. You're telling your story. How wonderful is that? And if that's not enough, just watch what's happening on Wall Street. Investors are rebelling every day. They're telling their stories of woe. They're saying, if you look at the statistics, I don't know if you know this, how sad this is. This is the first time in history in which we are making less than we made in 1971. That's our story. That's the story why I care about you. Because it's a story of our times. It's a story that you need to tell. Because you now have the power to tell your story, to determine your brand's authenticity. to make sure that it is personal. And that's what made Apple great. It took the construct that it was going to make it a personal brand, a personal asset, a personal technology. It was going to be about yours. Can you imagine if Microsoft, which I worked for and I still do, if Microsoft said to you, you can only use the spell checker and not the entire Word program, or you just want to use the addition, not the entire Excel program? Apple knew that contract that said it was about you. You can publish your own book, and we're going to show you that right now. So here's what I think the new brand managers need. They need some new technology when they become managers. This commercial says simply, I didn't know we had to wear helmets to be a brand manager, because all of a sudden it was about our customer stories. And here's the important part for brand managers. It's not just about customers. It's about their employee stories, getting their employee stories out there. It's about their investor stories, getting their investor stories out there. It's about their partner stories and getting their partner stories out there. It's about making storytelling our reality. So as a brand manager, I'm here to tell you, you're a storyteller. And your job is to get as many stories as possible, because you don't need to look other places in this world. You just need to be good listeners. You just remember the story about my kids and your kids. They just want to be heard. So what's the benefit of storytelling in your brand? Well, here's my view. We are now leaving the world of social media. That was a good beginning. I started my business in 1993. We managed about 70 million people, 15,000 corporate communities for 350 big brands, Major League Baseball, Playboy, ESPN, Goldman Sachs, all very interesting. But the most important thing I learned from it was this. It was still about the fact that social media was the beginning of the movement of the personal organization, of the stories of us. And so we manage 2.5 billion stories a month on behalf of our clients. We keep track of those stories. We propagate and promulgate those stories. We facilitate those stories. But it's not even about that, because that wasn't itself not enough. It was about the social enterprise. It was about accepting the reality that the institution was created 200 years ago to bring together human and financial capital to reduce transaction costs. But the internet does that better. It allows each of us to be us, to be human, to have our voices be heard, not just at the dinner table, but in every aspect of every day, of every part of our lives. And not just with our loved ones, but with our friends and our networks. And there is no stopping it. I have a 23-year-old son who's an investor in venture capital, big firm, $20 billion under management. He said to me, Dad, I know you've been doing this for a long time, but I went and saw your friend Mark Benioff, and I saw his conference. 45,000 people attended the Social Enterprise Conference. And then he went to VMware. 35,000 people attended that Social Enterprise Conference. All the same week. It is about the humanization of our society, the socialization of our activities. And so when you think about yourself as brand managers, you're really the managers of the story keepers, of the story tellers, of finding the most valuable stories, and everybody has important stories to tell about your brand as employees, as partners, as investors, and to harvest those stories. So what's the benefits? Well, people think, okay, what's the ROI of being a social enterprise? Let me give you the statistics. If you want to find them, I'm happy to send them to you. It's really quite simple. There's real ROI. First of all, customer loyalty goes up 10%. Purchases go up 18%. Support costs go down 15%. Because people want to be heard. They don't want to be told, they want to be heard. Employees, when they tell their stories, they're 30% more committed. They're 20% more engaged. And they require 10% less commitment in terms of development because they're sharing with each other what's relevant to them. They don't like top-down learning. They don't like being told any more than we did by our parents. If I'm an investor in product innovation space, I'm on an Eli Lilly board. And when we realized back in the turn of last century, 10 years ago, that we at Eli Lilly, like Procter & Gamble, no longer had the insights we needed to solve the greatest therapies of our times, drug therapies. So hands up, how many of you go outside your organizations to hear the stories of your constituents, people you don't even know, to crowdsource innovative ideas, once again to let them tell stories about their lives and how they solve things like biomarkers for Alzheimer's, who are not even scientists. How many of you do that? A very few number. Eli Lilly had this right, as did Procter & Gamble. Eli Lilly didn't have a monopoly on insights or on brand or on capabilities. They knew the world somewhere, someplace, somebody had a story to tell about how to solve a problem. My favorite story about the board I'm on with Eli Lilly is we never cleaned up Exxon Valdez. I didn't know that. We tried. Exxon tried. $2.3 billion of cleanup, never did. You know who cleaned it up? A concrete truck driver out of Chicago who realized that if he vibrated concrete at a certain speed to drive the concrete to the top of a 50-story tower, using just a simple paddle and moving the sludge 50 stories up, he might be able to do the same thing for moving from 50 stories down the sludge from the bottom of the Gulf of Valdez. The ExxonMobil engineers never figured that out because they don't have any concrete engineers, let alone concrete truck drivers. It's not their business. But that is the story of our times, that greatness exists in every one of us. And by accepting the fact that it is our job to hear them, to harness them, to acknowledge them, we might just do amazing things. I'm on a board called Alzheimer's, because we now acknowledge inside the Alzheimer's board that we don't know the answers, but we do know it exists out there because biomarkers are being discovered by people who are afflicted by the Alzheimer's disease. How many of you have Alzheimer relatives? I joined the Alzheimer board because I wanted to help Alzheimer's. I'm on the Downs board because I wanted to help people understand that the old way of solving these important therapies no longer worked. How many of you belong to LinkedIn? Why? Anybody want to tell me why? To get in touch. And why do you want to get in touch? Why do people want to get in touch with each other? To share experiences. That is the core of branding. That's the core of humanity. It's the core of business. So let's think about what our brand strategy should be. I'm going to start with some simple ones that you can all take home. Think about your constituents for a second. This is a brand called Nike. I'll never forget the fact when my wife came home one day and said, "Gee, Barry, I'm going to brand my own Nike shoe." I think, wow, that's cool. Nike's going to let them customers put their own brand on it. Now, my wife is dean of students at Harvard Medical and Dental School. So she starts branding her own shoe, but then she starts watching Heidi Klum. I want to tell you, my wife knows nothing about sewing. I just want to tell you, here's some example of stories. My wife knows nothing about sewing. She's never seen a Singer sewing machine. Now we have them in our household. And she watches Project Runway because Nike realized by making it about my wife, both her shoes and her sneakers, they could engage my wife in her stories. I mean, you don't even know my wife, but imagine, for all you guys in the room who have both wives and girlfriends, how many of you have that? A few of you, good. For all those guys who never thought their wives would sew, I have a sewing machine in my household. Because Nike realized the power of letting her brand their shoes. I can't even get the car manufacturer to pay $50,000 for a car. They won't let me put my brand on it. They won't even let me co-brand my car. And they'll let her co-brand her $30 or $50 or $100 shoe. That's personal. That's her story. Zappos. Anybody know Tony Hsieh? Right here in town, Zappos. I've known Tony for a decade, like I know Tony Schwartz, just by chance. I didn't walk for, you never really need to know this, I didn't walk for 2 years. I had a spinal cord injury. I started walking this spring. Tony was on tour, and his Delivering Happiness tour, and he asked me to come out and do a tape. Because if you've never walked, you need to know what it's like to be in a hospital for a year, and to know that you may never walk again. And when you call Zappos and you ask them, I haven't walked for a year, heels up, heels down. I didn't even realize there was such a technology, but when you've never walked in your adult life for a long time, heels up, heels down make a big difference. If you walk in the beach, heels down, not heels up. And so Zappos knows from the stories of their constituents, based on your orthopedic issues and injuries, heels up, heels down. So I wear heels down now. And as I told Tony on his tour, Tony, I've known you for a decade. Thank you for helping me walk again. I'll never shop any other place than Zappos because they let me try on hundreds of shoes, heels down. That's a personal story. Channel. Everybody knows commercial? Can I get you guys to fire this thing? Technology is important.
I bought something from you last week, and I'm very disappointed.
Oh, yeah? What's the problem?
Yeah, well, my BlackBerry is not working.
What's about it? Run out of juice?
No, it's completely frozen.
Oh, yeah, I can see that. I'll tell you what. Let's try it on orange.
That's got a few black spots, you see that?
Oh, dear, yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Was there anything I do to get my BlackBerry working?
Well, it could be an application issue. But where do you store that BlackBerry?
Well, it's on my desktop.
Well, you could try using a mouse to drag the BlackBerry to the trash. Then after you've done that, you might want to launch the BlackBerry from the desktop.
Well, I've already tried that a few times. I mean, all it did was mess up Windows.
Well, it might be worth waiting a couple of weeks. They got the latest BlackBerries coming in then.
Well, could you give me a date?
Certainly.
Let me put that date in my diary.
Anything else I can help you with?
Yes, I've also got a problem, to be honest, with my Apple.
Oh, dear, that is an old Apple, isn't it?
Yeah.
When did you buy that?
Last week.
Last week? Oh, they brought out 2 new Apples since then. What's the problem with it?
Well, I tried to put my dongle in it, and it won't fit.
Oh, yeah. And how big's your dongle?
Well, I don't know much about these things, but my wife's seen a few dongles in her time. And she says it's a little bit on the small side.
Well, I'm afraid there's not a lot I can do about that. Tell you what, let me try booting it. No, it's crashed. Anything else I can help you with?
Well, funnily enough, yes, my grandson's birthday soon, you
yeah.
see. Now, he's already got an apple and a blackberry. I mean, have you got anything else that you might just like?
Well, we're doing a special offer on these. I mean, I can't make head or tail of them, but the kids seem to like them.
Okay.
Xbox. 360.
Now, the reason I tell that story, besides the fact, how many of you are looking at iPhone 5s today? How many of you are interested? Hands up, please. 1 o'clock, Eastern Standard. The channel in which you tell the story is as important as the story itself. Everybody forgets that Marsh McLuhan is wrong. Marsh McLuhan was the one who said the medium is the message. The medium's not the message. It never was. My message to you is we're on a massive collision course between us as individuals and the traditional view of institutions, institutional brand management, institutional marketing versus individual storytelling. My message to you is the message is what matters. I always say to women, all of you women, you should have put in term limits for your husbands. I don't know how you didn't get that one right. I'm in my 7th term of office, 28 years. As my wife says, it's as important the tone you use as it is what you say. Brands need to acknowledge the fact that they have their term limits are out of order. They need a new tone. They need a new story. And luckily, Marsh McLuhan said one more thing when he said the medium is not the message. He said something else. Don't believe everything I say. He's correct. The message is what matters. Your message and your storytelling from everybody you touch. When I look at people's websites, they're still just brand websites. They're all broadcast. They might as well be my dad from West Point and my mom from Finch Finishing School for Women. They're not embracive. They're not personal. And they're not even multi-channel. They don't acknowledge the fact that my parents are in their 80s and they're not social mediaists. They like the personal touch like we're doing here today. So when banks try to force me online or my parents online, that might work for me, or possibly it does for my kids. But it does not work for my parents and my in-laws who are in their 80s. And so when banks or organizations or hospitals or healthcare providers manage the channel on behalf of us, they haven't yet figured out that the medium is not the message. The message is, it's about us. And therefore, they need to not just manage and accept the medium, they need to match the medium and the message with the individual. When you force channels on people, you lose them. Bank of America, which was a client of mine, lost me a long time ago when they said, well, Barry, we've got the biggest community, 28 million people. That was big back when I worked for them. Facebook has nearly 1 billion because they enabled us to tell our stories our ways. The hardest one for us all as institutional participants is that compensations and systems have to change. If I'm going to embrace you as an individual and acknowledge the fact that your stories matter, your intellectual property matters, your friends matter, your friends of friends matter, your friends of friends of friends matter. How many of your organizations know their employees' friends? Very few. How many of your employers know your friends of friends of friends? How about your friends of your customers? How about your friends of your friends of your customers? Not one institution I work for knows. How could they know anything about my story then? How could they really mean it's important to them when they don't know me? And here's where it really breaks down. Apple paid out more money last year to its developer community than it paid out to its shareholders. $2.5 billion to the developer community because they recognized that in the network was the stories of their time, was the ecosystems of their opportunity, was the making of their network. And yet not a board I serve has realized that they need to align their compensation with everybody who contributes to their brand. Not one, except for the most valuable company in the world, Apple. So here's where we're going to try something different today. I did this the last minute with Len, as he knows. We're not so sure this is going to work with BarnesandNoble.com. I decided I'm going to write a social book this weekend. Literally, I'm going to write a book this weekend about us. I had no idea if this was going to work. Len, do we know if this is going to work? We still don't know if this is going to work. He has no idea if this is going to work. So, and neither did Barnes & Noble, neither did Apple today when we tried to do this morning. No one knew if this worked. So this weekend I wrote a book called Social Power. We published it this morning just in time for this. It is loaded real time. You can go to see Terry and Crystal. Hopefully this will work on your Nook. Let's see if this comes up, please. And we are giving it away for free to encourage you all to tell your story. So it's a virtual book about us and our story of our times. All you have to do is go back to see Barnes & Noble. I can't get their Nook to work right now. And to sign up to tell your story. That's all I'm asking you to do. To start your journey today, to go get a free ebook on how to tell your story, and to be part of the social world. So I need you to go back and see Terry and Crystal, if you want to. See how to tell your story, your own brand, your own message, as an employee, as a customer, as a parent, as a friend, as a sibling, as a participant in our world where something dramatically is happening around us on Wall Street and on Main Street. And the good news is all of us have stories to tell. I hope all of you tweeted with just a little story so someone in this room can see what it is that your story is. That's all I ask. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do, besides seeing the back of the room, is now to stand up. All of you, if you don't mind, bring up the lights. I want you to take out your business cards. Bring up the lights, please. And I want you to give your business cards to the other people at the table. But here's how I want you to tender them. I want you to tender them with a personal story. Not, hi, I'm Barry Lieber from Open Matters, and I serve a bunch of yada, yada, yada boards. Hi, this is my name. This is my story. This is why it matters to you. And this is how I can help you and you can help me make this most important event done by Len and his wife memorable, because it was and it is a personal experience for every one of us. Please give your cards to each of them and tell a story, and I want you to hug them to remind yourself, yes, no grabbing anyone's behinds, I'll get myself in trouble. I want you to hug the person next to you to remind them how important this event was and to tell the story of your lives. Take a minute, and I want to make it personal. For all of you doing this, I don't buy it. Are we in time? Done? I'll be done at 11:30. What time is it supposed to be? 11:30? Yeah. Okay, so I'm done. I'm going to close it. Now I want you all to give yourself a standing ovation. If I could get you all to give a standing ovation to remind yourself the story is about you that you have the power to tell a story that is meaningful in your lives. And by telling your meaningful story, you don't have to look anyplace else to reinvigorate your brand. Thank you all very much. Go see Barnes & Noble at the back, and I wish you all, from my heart, an amazing, wonderful life. Thank you all very, very much. Round of applause for all of you. Thank you all very, very much.